found the story itself is really the human experience. And it was so, just each page I found relatable from all perspectives, all characters' perspectives. And I feel like as humans, we've all been in all positions. We've all misjudged or blamed or held on to grievances. And we've certainly all been stripped to our knees and been humbled, whether that be through like our own consciousness or a loss of a loved one or a diagnosis or betrayal. We've certainly all spent time in our own pit.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
certainly have. I certainly have. Do you believe that one can wake up without such pain?
I think it's possible. I know of one example in the 20th century. There was the great Indian sage Ramana Maharshi, who
Mm.
at the age of 16 just experienced a radical fear of death and lay down on the floor and let it take him all the way. And when he opened his eyes, he was the enlightened sage that he was at the age of 50 or 60 or 70. It was all there in him as a 16-year-old boy. I don't know of any other examples. My wife, Katie, for example, had 10 years of horrible suffering and self-hatred and suicidal thoughts. And all the examples I know in the tradition I know best, which is Zen Buddhism, involves men undergoing great austerities and huge prolonged meditation practices of doing nothing else but concentrate on a meditative theme. And this could be for a year, or 5 years, or 20 years, or 30 years. There was great perseverance poured into the practice by all of them. And sometimes it did take decades. Rarely, with an extremely gifted young monk, was there a total opening toward the beginning. Mostly people had to slog through the depths of their personal flaws. So in short, it's rare for there not to be any suffering involved. It is possible, though.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's what makes it so relatable, just through each story and each page was just, we all have our own trials and tribulations and pains that we all navigate. And just the grace. And, I found it so beautiful the way that you breathe compassion, Stephen, and love and understanding to all perspectives. And I felt like every character you portrayed or you showed their innocence, and you had us walk in each individual's shoes and understanding their unconsciousness and yet their innocence in the same breath, and seeing that they really could have chosen any different, believing the thoughts that they believed in that moment.
Yeah, so I'm very glad that you experienced it that way. What I love about this book, as opposed to books that tell us the what, is that the lessons are embodied in story form. And it's all well enough to, for example, listen to Jesus saying we need to forgive not only once, not only 7 times, but 70 times seven, which is a powerful statement in itself.
Mm.
But what a story does is to take us through the difficulties, the blindnesses, the unpleasant parts of the personality, and take us into what it actually feels like to be free of that all. So, it's one thing to read that total forgiveness is possible or awakening is possible. It's
Mhm.
another thing to actually feel it in your fingertips and in
Mhm.
blood in your vein through the minute particulars of a beautiful story. And that's what I've tried to do in this book.
Well, you did it in the most gorgeous way, Stephen. I'm curious, would you say that changing our perspective is part of our awakening? And for the listeners, what is awakening and how would you actually define it?
Well, I wouldn't define it for one thing. I would say when somebody wakes up, they know it. They know that they and it's testable. One of the great things about the Zen tradition is that there are thousand-year-old ways of testing this by specific questions. Now, a profound awakening experience is what I'd call self-evident. It doesn't need to be tested, but there are many experiences of lesser openings that may feel to the person as if, well, this is it. This is everything. This is the most profound thing that was possible. And that can lead easily to a kind of self-delusion. In fact, most enlightenment experiences are fairly short term. People can be in bliss for a few hours or a day or a couple of weeks, and then their ordinary consciousness gradually seeps back.
Mm.
And that's because of that underworld that Katie talks about. But rarely this does happen. It can be so complete and so utter and profound that the normal state of consciousness never comes back. The suffering never comes back. And
Mm.
that's what happened with Katie. So I'd say what the litmus test is the state of constant gratitude.
Mhm.
If gratitude is something that lasts throughout the day, throughout the months and years, and you're never called back to a state where you're feeling anger and sadness, then you can be fairly sure that this is something genuine and the real deal.
Mm.
But if you step back into a consciousness where there's any annoyance or anger or sorrow, then you can be sure that you're believing an unquestioned thought. And that's a wonderful occasion for questioning whatever thought that is bringing you back into that kind of consciousness.
Yes, it's certainly the work and inquiry for myself, once again, has been such an extraordinary tool. When I was a younger woman, I had the naive reality that awakening or enlightenment was this thing to be achieved or this state to be attained. And through my own practice and just life having its way as it does with all of us, just the reality and the experience that awakening and asleepness is almost a part of each breath. I think each moment allows us the opportunity to wake up to what we haven't seen, to connect to something deeper, to let go, to inquire so that we can see a broader, more conscious and grace filled perspective.
Yes, and thank goodness there are tried and true tested techniques to help remind us of who we really are. So, one of them is meditation, one of them is
Yes.
self inquiry, the way Katie teaches it, and I'm sure there are others that I'm not familiar with as well.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, that's what's so beautiful is life gives us all the tools. It's certainly benevolent that we need to be able to, unravel any knots in our minds and connect us to reality more accurately. Stephen, something that really struck me is, and I appreciated, was the fact that you made the characters in the book so human in every way. You wove in a flavor of sexuality throughout their own desires and longings and trials and tribulations. I've had my own innocence almost, you think of biblical times almost as purity and chastity, rather than the reality that they were just as human like us. They bled, they sweat, they longed, they had temptations like we do. What made you choose to write so descriptively?
Well, it was actually a question of entering the characters as fully and deeply as I possibly could, and seeing them in the situations of the story gave rise to these, what I hope are vivid descriptions throughout the book. But in particular, it was the women characters that I was interested. Well, there's Joseph, of course, that was a most fascinating character from the start. But